What's up, guys? Welcome back to Deck Tech for Decks, and today we are doing our weekly budget build on Magnus the Red. Now, this turned out as a fun budget build and turned very quickly into making your friend's life a living hell for $50. Now, I think that has to do with the commander. It's just a lot more powerful than I initially thought it was. Turns out it's not hard to slam tokens onto the battlefield, making your spells cost essentially nothing, and then we're running a lot of X spells to draw a lot of cards, counter people's spell, and make a lot of pretty massive tokens. Additionally, there's a few lines that this deck can just go infinite, and that happened by mostly accident. Honestly, you throw in a Stormkiln Artist and a Runaway Steamkin, and there's a few buyback spells that just go insane in this deck. So, without further ado, if you're ready to make your friend's life hell on a budget, let's get into it. The first thing we're going to want to do is create a lot of tokens. That way we're paying almost nothing for our instant and sorcery spells. Tower End Sky Summoner and Young Pyromancer and Murmuring Mystic are going to make sure we just, create a token whenever we cast an instant or sorcery spell. Third Path Iconoclast can also do this. Metallurgic Summonings and Decafractal Theorist are really awesome because we're going to get some massive tokens, not just, little 1/1s. Additionally, Metallurgic Summonings can go ahead and bring back our instant and sorcery spells late game, which is pretty useful. The Locust God. This is a really good deck for this because we run a lot of X card draw spells, right? So if we draw, 5 cards, boom, we get 5 1/1s, and then next turn we can just draw 10 cards, get 10 1/1s, and honestly, we can end the game pretty fast with this guy on the battlefield. Zaffy. I really like this guy because one, he's going to give us the ability to scry, he gives us the ability to create tokens, and he gives us the ability to dome our opponents for 10 damage. Loyal Apprentice and Nader Kraken are just solid cards early game to net us some tokens here and there to really just start the ramping up. Hordling Outburst and Goblin War Party are super solid early cards, right? To just really start getting those tokens onto the battlefield. We run Keep in the deck because it's just a solid way to create some tokens tacked onto a land, and Rise from the Tides. I like this late game, right? We've been beaten down, all of our instant and sorcery spells are in our graveyard, and we have no tokens on the battlefield. Well, we can cast Rise from the Tides, get an instant board state, and we're back to churning through our deck. Stolen by the Fate and Gyard's Belligerence are super solid cards to not only get rid of our opponent's pesky creatures, but then also create more tokens. Now, creating tokens is fun and all, but let's talk about what absolutely breaks Magnus. I'm talking about Stormkiln Artist and Runaway Steamkin paired with buyback effects like Haze of Rage and Seething Anger. Now, as long as we have enough tokens to pay for that buyback effect, we get infinite spell casts. All you'll need is a Young Pyromancer effect, and you'll even get infinite creatures. Now, it's definitely not hard to take out all of our opponents from this point, right? We've got infinite tokens, all of our spells cost nothing, our draw spells, we can basically draw our whole deck now because we have infinite tokens, right? So, from this point, all you'll need to do is create infinite tokens, attack, and you've got the win. And that's just if you want to get complicated, because on its face, Haze of Rage and Seething Anger are going to give your creatures infinite power anyway. So in reality, you only really need 3 creatures to, do your opponents in. Let's talk about the supporting cards in the deck. We have March of Swirling Mists and Change of Plans. Phasing out is one of the only mechanics that can save your tokens from a board wipe, right? So these cards essentially say for Change of Plans, hey, pay 2 mana, protect your whole board, and same thing for Swirling Mists, right? I mean, it won't protect your commander or any other creatures, but your tokens are going to be unaffected. But we always can just pay a little extra mana and our creatures are going to be saved too. Additionally, Change of Plans gives us the ability to connive with all of our creatures, so we're sifting through our deck while we're doing this. Mizzix, this guy is essentially just another commander in the deck, right? Why not include him? That way, if we ever do lose Magnus, we always have a backup plan. Past in Flames. I stopped running this card in most of my decks because I found out 4 mana and then you gotta cast spells from your graveyard. You're already kind of like 4 mana deep into the turn, so it's not that effective. But 1 red to go ahead and get access to your whole graveyard. That sounds a lot better to me. We also run Reiterate and Capsize because why not, guys? That buyback is broken with this commander. They're going to ask by the end of the game, are you sure this is a budget deck? Lastly, we have Swiftfoot Boots, just to protect your commander, right? Let's get into the card draw, and as you can probably guess, it's mostly X-Spell focused. We have Commander's Insight, Diviner's Portent, and even the Score. Lastly, Universal Surveillance. These are the least effective of the, draw spells because of the mana it costs. But half of these can reduce that mana in some way or give you an added benefit for having to spend that much mana. Mind Spring, Pull from Tomorrow and Silver Scrutiny are much more efficient because of the only having to pay 2 blue pips, and they're really more effective at drawing cards. Thassa's Intervention is pretty solid because not only can it, dig you pretty deep into your library, but it is also a counter spell on top of that. Stroke of Genius is just better because, like I said, we're reducing the generic mana costs, so the blue pip is a lot better than having, 3 blue pips and then X. Read the Ruins is super efficient because we'll just sacrifice one of our many tokens. And lastly, we have Breakthrough. Now, Breakthrough can only draw us 4 cards, but it's pretty useful because we can have X equal to the amount of cards we'll be at after we draw those cards, making us discard 0. So, for all intents and purposes, in this deck, it says draw 4 for 1 mana. Pretty broken. Lastly, we have Apex of Power. Super, castable in this deck. We're just going to go ahead and exile the top 7 cards of our library and, add 10 mana to our mana pool because that sounds pretty fair. Moving on to ramp, we have Seething Song and Mana Geyser. I think Mana Geyser especially is super underrated, guys. Everybody taps out their mana 90% of the time in Commander, especially in casual play, so this has the potential to just, throw 15 mana into your mana pool. Elemental's Palette. This is really solid for those X-Spell decks, and this is definitely one of those. This is going to tap for a ton of mana late game. Arcane Signet. Is it Signet just solid ramp for turn 2? Fire Diamond and Sky Diamond, again, we're trying to ramp on turn 2, so that fits perfectly here. Wayfarer's Bauble, Fellowar Stone, turn 2 Mana Rocks. That's all we need. Lastly, guys, we're moving on to removal, and I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I did not expect it to be this heavy when I started building the deck, but it just makes sense. Red Sun's Twilight and Blue Sun's Twilight. These are pretty solid cards in the deck. Red Sun's going to give us an explosive turn because we're going to blow up everybody's mana rocks and then we're going to have them, and we're really only going to try to spend 2 mana to do that. Additionally, Blue Sun's Twilight's going to give us the best creature on the battlefield while, giving us a token of the best creature on the battlefield. Access Denied and Release the Gremlins is going to destroy our opponent's stuff while giving us tokens, which is exactly what this deck wants to do. I like Illithid Harvester here because it's supposed to be balanced because it's supposed to cost a ton of mana to pull off. But in reality, we're basically only spending 2 blue to tap a whole bunch of creatures and then 5 mana to throw this guy onto the battlefield, so you're 7 mana deep to destroy every important creature on the battlefield effectively. Additionally, sometimes you don't even have to use that sorcery part of this because people have just tapped with their best creatures anyway. Sticking on the theme of giving our opponents tokens, we have Curse of the Swine. Now you can use this on yourself to turn your 1/1s into 2/2s, which could be useful in some scenarios, but honestly we're mostly just attacking our opponent's creatures for this, and it does exile, which I think a lot of people overlook. Spell Swindle, our commander turns this basically into a Mana Geyser, so why not? We also run Spell Burst because, again, buyback is broken. With a Stormkiln Artist on the battlefield, you're gonna feel super safe, and honestly, you're gonna probably win the game from there. Rolling Earthquake is just a super solid board wipe in the deck. We know we're gonna be able to get rid of everything. Additionally, you get bonus points if you phase out before casting it. And for the final stretch, we are running Logic Knot, Syncopate, Power Sync, Condescend, Clash of Wills, and Broken Ambitions for our X-Spell Counterspell package. Now, that's going to do it for the deck tech. Let me know what you guys think about this deck because honestly, I started building it. It was a pretty, solid budget brew. And then I was looking at it and I was like, wow, this might actually be pretty competitive. So I'm definitely excited to see what you guys think about this deck. Magnus the Red, probably higher power commander than I initially thought. And honestly, really fun build. As always, I hope this helped you in your deck building endeavors, and I will see you in the next one.